This is Black Thought, and I'm your host, Dr. Hutchinson. And I am excited about the individual who is here with us today. I'm excited because I can call a friend, and we also tease each other and call each other cousin. I won't tell you why, but I'm glad that she's here. She means a lot to the great city of Memphis, and we are all the better for having her as a part of us. And so I introduce to you none other than Wendi Thomas, who is currently a writer for the Memphis Flyer. God bless you. Good to have you here today.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Bishop, Reverend, cousin,
all
apostle.
Right. I'll take all of that. Well, I will tell you, just some slight disclosure. We were talking some time ago, and it turns out that her mother's people and my father's people are from the same area in Jamaica. So we might be cousins for real. Don't know yet, but there's a chance.
Yes, it's possible. It's possible.
So yeah. I'm glad and blessed to know. But anyway, let me kind of get to some areas. First of all, I'm glad you're here because I know that you don't generally do television interviews.
I don't. I try to stay as incognito as possible, but you know, I got to come out for my cousin, for my people.
Well, I appreciate that. So y'all heard it. So you can pack those hate letters away. But anyway, glad to have you. Let me ask you this: native Memphian?
You know, that's an interesting question. My sister and I were debating that just on Monday because I wasn't born here in Memphis. And so I think technically to be a native, you're supposed to be born somewhere. I was born in Ohio, but we moved here when I was 8. So, I mean, I rep Memphis.
Well, you can rep it and graduate from high school here, right?
White Station High.
Oh, yeah. Well, then, you can definitely rep it. And then where'd you go to school from there?
So after I graduated from White Station High School I went on to Butler University in Indianapolis. And then after I graduated from there, I started working at the Indianapolis Star. I was a reporter, and then I worked at Nashville, Charlotte, and then came back to Memphis in 2003.
So by the time you arrived at the Commercial Appeal, you had an extensive resume.
Yeah, I'd been at 3 papers before I came back here. And I actually interned at the Commercial Appeal when I was in college, and I can't say the year either because that'll let you know when I came out of high school, but a good while ago. Yeah, so.
And so for many years, you had a column, and for many years it seemed like you were controversial because you were the voice of a community, but at times you would critique the community. So at times you had friends over here and friends over there, enemies over here and enemies over there. Right. Describe what that was like for us.
Well, when I started writing the column at the Commercial Appeal in August 2003, I was the first black woman they'd ever had writing a column in Memphis, a city that's been majority black for a long time, and a metropolitan statistical area that's been majority black for a long time. So you would think that hearing from a black woman's perspective would not be seen maybe that unusual, but for a lot of Commercial Appeal readers, I think it was. And so, you know, it's really interesting kind of trying to straddle this line of being observer, but then also, you know, being black and being a woman and having certain viewpoints that, you know, need to be expressed. And so, you know, while I had the job and while I was, you know, being given the freedom to say what I felt like needed to be said, it was a great job. It was a great job. And I think when I first started writing, because I was younger, you know, I tended to focus more on individuals and individual people's foibles or flaws or what have you. Mm-hmm. And then as I grew and gained a little bit of wisdom, I started to look more at institutions and systems and processes. And so I think I'd made a lot of kind of enemies initially talking about individual people, but then as I went on to talk about systems and history, then I made a whole bunch more, I think, kind of enemies, because, you know, power doesn't like to be challenged. And
exactly.
That was that was something that I found important to do.
Well, in saying that, I want to go to an article that really, for lack of a better term, created some controversy, but also created a large amen corner for you. And that was the article when you addressed some of the things that Henry Brooks has said. And let me say for the record, I know Henry Brooks. know her reasonably well. When you meet her, she's the same person today as she was yesterday. Now, do I agree with how she said what she said? No, I don't. But when you get past the fact that we just saw a little snippet of what she said, she was speaking to the disparities in addressing some of the contracts were being awarded to minority-owned businesses. And what you did, you put some research to the emotion of what she said and created that article. Speak to us about some of the facts that were contained in the article and the article in general.
Okay. So this was in, gosh, I want to say maybe April, spring of this year. And Henry Brooks, Shelby County Commissioner, had made some kind of intemperate remarks during a county commission meeting about a contract, a roofing contract that was going to go to a Latino-owned firm. And she basically was saying that there's racial disparities in municipal contracting, which is factually accurate, right? So the way she said it, inelegant, yes. But the facts of it, absolutely 100% true. And so Henry has a history of saying things that aren't, the way she says them aren't very nice. But then when you go and look, the research is there, right? She's not just spouting off at the mouth. So I went and looked, tried to get some information on racial disparity studies, and I went through the Commercial Appeals archives and found references to a study. I think it might have been 1990 or 1980, and it was old. And so I couldn't find a copy anywhere. I ended up having to go to the library in some Tennessee research room that you have to get admitted to make copies of this book. I mean, it had been so long since I stood at a copy machine, and made copies of pages. But then you could see the history and the record of basically minority firms being pretty much shut out of municipal contracting. And so if you think about it, billions of dollars being spent over time by city government, county government on construction, consulting services, computer services, you name it, anything that these governments contract out. And a very, very, very small portion of this money is going to firms owned by black people or women. And so basically you've got a majority minority tax base paying taxes to then have their local governments turn around and give this money to mainly white-owned firms, and then we want to talk about why is Memphis so poor, So you think about the opportunity to build wealth and how most of that comes through entrepreneurship. You don't really get rich working for somebody else. You get rich working for yourself or owning your own businesses. And so just kind of exploring some of those tensions and just the really disappointing share of money that's going to minority-owned firms. And if government can't get it right, and we've got majority black city council, county commission, a black city mayor. Well, we don't have a black county mayor, but if they can't get it right in government, there's just absolutely no hope in the private sector of seeing any kind of parity in terms of access to the contracts and the opportunity to build wealth.
Well, your article made a lot of impact. These are things that have been said in the community. I know I've said it on this show. Others have said it. I've seen it in the Tri-State Defender and other places. But you galvanized the conversation and really put it to where it was seen by a lot of people and wrestled with by a lot of people. And one of the things that's troubling, and you alluded to it, is we have elected officials that don't understand the need to break up some of these larger contracts so that everybody can eat. When you have a city that arguably you could say is 70% black because we're constantly undercounted, and you have a county that's about 55% black, but yet we get no contracts, and less than 1% of the total business receipts in the county come out of black businesses. We have a severe problem.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's obscene, really, is what it is. It's inexcusable. It's inexplicable. And in looking at some of those disparity studies back in the 80s and the 90s, and then there was one I think done as recently as 2010 for the city of Memphis. And Shelby County, I should say, has given up. Like, they don't even track it anymore. So if you went to them right now and said, tell me what percentage of your business you do with minority-owned firms, they couldn't tell you because they don't track minority-owned firms anymore. They track locally owned businesses, small businesses. So, and the reason they started tracking it like that was in response to some lawsuits from white-owned firms who said, hey, we're being discriminated against because you're having these minority, I don't even want to call them set-asides, but these goals to spend a certain percentage of the money with minority-owned businesses. So it's a shame.
So wait a minute, let me understand something you just said. I don't think I'm slow, but I want to make sure I heard you.
Okay.
These majority-owned businesses were complaining because of quote-unquote set-asides. But yet when you look at this local market, even with set-asides, even though you've said also that we're not getting set-asides from certain aspects of government, but even with this, we have less than 1% of the business receipts in a community that's about 70% black.
Right. I mean, you're a pastor, so I'll be nice. But the gall you have to have to when you're getting, and when I say we, I mean white-owned businesses as a whole are getting 95% of the pie, right? And then there's 5% maybe being allocated for minority and women-owned firms. So then that ends up being a lot of white women-owned firms, but minority and women-owned firms, we'll just put them together. And then for these majority white firms to say, wait a minute, you want to set aside 5%? That's too much. We want to sue, so you can't do that. It's absolutely insane. The greed.
Yeah.
It's stunning.
Let me help you with this. You say I'm a pastor. You want to use stronger language, so we'll use the Spanish language to meet in the middle. Cojones.
Cojones. Yes, the size of the cojones. It's just, it's absolutely stunning. And so what Shelby County government did in response to that was to say, okay, we won't track minority and women-owned businesses anymore. We'll do a locally owned small businesses. So now they measure small by the dollar amount of the receipts that they take in that year. I think it may be under $2 million or $5 million, but then you could still be a white male small business and still be getting that business, and minority companies still being shut out. And the county can't tell you because they don't track it.
Well, let's break this down to the lowest common denominator and use some ebonics. They're going to keep doing the nothing that they've been doing with tracking it in this way.
Right. But we could demand more. So, we just had an election, and Deidre Malone was up against Mayor Luttrell, and, she didn't win, but we didn't even, I don't think, get to have the kind of conversation that we needed to have about this, because people do what they want to do, right? That's something I learned, working in corporate America. People do what they want to do. So if they wanted to track this, they could. And there is a way you can figure it out. You have to ask them for all these monthly reports, and then basically sit down with somebody who knows who the black-owned businesses are, and kind of reverse engineer it and say, okay, well, I know these businesses are owned by black people. It's just ridiculous. I mean, you measure what matters. And clearly, our local government is saying this doesn't matter because we're not even bothering to measure it.
Well, now